Veteran saves 96-year-old from crash, but she makes him buy her $5 storage full of junk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It was a cold winter morning when Jack, a weathered and battle-worn veteran, found himself driving down a rural road just outside a small town in Michigan. The icy winds howled as his truck crept along the snow-packed highway. He had been living in isolation for years after returning from service, his past filled with memories that still haunted him. The storm had picked up, and the roads were slippery, making it harder for anyone to navigate, but Jack knew these roads well. His old truck rumbled along as if it too had lived through many battles. As he drove, he saw something in the distance, a flash of movement. A car had swerved off the road, crashing into a tree, its front end crumpled and smoke rising from the engine. Jack's heart raced. Without thinking, he slammed the brakes and pulled over to the side. His trained hands quickly grabbed his emergency kit as he ran towards the wreck. Inside the car was an elderly woman, struggling to free herself. Her face was pale, her frail body pinned against the seat. Her white hair was tangled, and her hands trembled as she tried to grasp the door handle. "Hold on, I've got you," Jack shouted, his voice calm but urgent. He yanked the door open and gently pulled the woman from the wreckage, being careful not to hurt her further. She was in shock, but she was alive. As he carried her to safety, she whispered in a soft, raspy voice, "You saved me, young man. You have no idea how much this means to me." Jack set her down by the side of the road, offering her his coat to keep her warm. "You're going to be okay. Just breathe. I'm calling for help." But before he could reach for his phone, the woman grabbed his arm with surprising strength for her age. "Wait," she said, her eyes sharp and knowing. "I don't need help. You've done enough. But I will ask you for something in return." Jack looked at her, confused. "I don't need anything from you. Just glad I could help." The woman smiled softly, her blue eyes glinting with something Jack couldn't quite place. "I'm going to need you to buy my storage unit. It's been sitting there for years, filled with things no one else wants. Just $5, and it's yours." Jack raised an eyebrow, unsure if this was some sort of joke. "A storage unit? I don't know. I don't really have the money to be buying random stuff." The woman's smile grew wider. $5. That's all it will cost you. And what you'll find inside, well, it's more valuable than you think." Jack hesitated, still unsure of what was going on. But there was something about the old woman's conviction that made him agree. After all, what harm could there be in a $5 storage unit? What he didn't know was that this small, seemingly insignificant transaction would lead him on a path that would change his life forever. Jack stood by his truck, still processing the strange request from the old woman he had just saved. She had insisted he buy her storage unit, filled with forgotten items, for just $5. $5 wasn't much, but Jack still couldn't wrap his head around why she would ask him, a stranger, to take something that had apparently been sitting for years. He had a moment of hesitation, but something about Mabel's calm insistence and the way she looked at him with those piercing blue eyes made him agree. It was almost as if she knew something he didn't. "All right," he finally said. "I'll buy the storage. But if it's filled with junk, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it." Mabel chuckled softly, the sound warm despite the cold air. "You'll see, young man. You'll see." The next day, Jack found himself driving to the storage facility that Mabel had directed him to. It was a small, run-down building on the outskirts of town, far from the hustle and bustle of the busy streets. The sign out front read, "Birchwood Storage," its letters faded and peeling. Jack parked his truck and walked into the small office to meet the manager. An older man with glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He handed over the $5 bill, still unsure what he was getting into. "You're here for Unit 12? The manager asked, looking at the paper in his hand. Jack nodded. "Yes, that's the one." The man handed him the key with a faint smile. "It's been sitting for a long time. Not much to look at, but I guess you'll find out soon enough." Jack nodded, thanked the manager, and walked outside to the back of the building where the storage units were located. The air was still cold, and the wind seemed to bite a little harder today. He found Unit 12 easily enough, its rusted metal door standing slightly ajar as if inviting him to take a look inside. Jack hesitated for a moment before unlocking the door. The hinges creaked as the door slowly swung open. Inside was a small, dark space filled with a mix of boxes, old furniture, and various knickknacks. At first glance, it looked like exactly what he had expected, just junk. But something about the way it was all arranged made Jack pause. There was an old wooden chest in the back corner, its surface worn with age, but it seemed to stand out among the clutter. Something about it caught his attention. He walked over to the chest and knelt down. The lid was heavy, but it opened with a slight push. Inside, he found something unexpected: old documents, photographs, and several small trinkets. His fingers brushed against a weathered piece of paper, and as he unfolded it, his eyes widened. It was a letter, dated from the 1940s, written in elegant cursive. As Jack read the letter, his mind began to race. The letter was from a man named Samuel Halloway, Mabel's late husband, and it spoke of a hidden fortune, a legacy left behind for someone with the courage to find it. The letter mentioned a series of locations, cryptic clues, and a treasure buried under the town. Jack's heart raced. Was this what Mabel had meant when she said he would see what was inside? He carefully placed the letter back into the chest and started to sift through the rest of the items. Among the old photos and books, he found a faded map with markings that seemed to correspond to places around town. His mind was spinning. Could Mabel have known about this treasure all along? Or had she sent him on a journey without telling him the full story? As Jack stood up, the weight of the discovery settled in his chest. He had no idea what to do with this information or what kind of treasure awaited him. But one thing was certain: his life was about to change in a way he never could have expected. With the letter and map in hand, he locked the storage unit and walked back to his truck. The air was cold, but his thoughts were racing as he drove back to Mabel's house. He couldn't shake the feeling that something big was unfolding. The woman he had helped had given him more than just a simple task. She had given him a clue to a mystery that had been hidden for decades. Jack's mind was filled with questions, but one thing was clear: he had to follow the clues. The adventure had just begun, and he had no idea where it would lead, but he knew that whatever was waiting at the end of the road would change everything. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something much bigger than he had anticipated. The old letter, the faded map, and the cryptic clues all pointed towards something hidden beneath the very town he had lived in for years. He had always been the quiet, solitary type, but now, the sense of urgency gnawed at him. He had to find out what this was all about. The next morning, Jack was up before dawn. He couldn't wait any longer. With the map in hand, he set out to explore the locations mentioned in the letter. The first clue led him to a small, abandoned chapel just outside town. The church had been closed for years, its stained glass windows cracked, and the bell tower looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Jack approached cautiously, feeling a strange pull to the place. As he walked around the back of the chapel, his eyes fell upon a stone archway covered in moss. The map had marked this spot with a symbol he hadn't recognized, but now, standing before it, he could sense there was something here, something hidden. He ran his hand along the stones, searching for any sign of a hidden entrance or a clue. And then, just as he was about to give up, his fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. He pressed harder, and the stone moved slightly. Jack's heart raced. He stepped back, took a deep breath, and then pushed with all his might. The stone door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside, there was nothing but dust and cobwebs. But as Jack stepped inside, his eyes caught sight of something gleaming in the corner of the room. He moved toward it and found an old iron chest, its lock rusted but still intact. He crouched down and opened it, his hands trembling with excitement. Inside, he found several more pieces of parchment, each one marked with more symbols and cryptic messages. These were the final pieces of the puzzle. He quickly read through the papers, and a pattern began to emerge. The treasure wasn't money, but something far more valuable, an old family heirloom that had been lost to time. The papers spoke of a powerful artifact that could change the fate of anyone who possessed it. Jack's mind was reeling. He had no idea what this artifact was or what it could do, but he knew he had to find it. The next clue led him to the town's old library, a place he hadn't visited in years. The library was a beautiful, crumbling building, filled with rows upon rows of dusty books. As Jack entered, the air felt thick with history, and he could almost hear the whispers of the past. He walked to the back of the library, where the oldest books were kept. There, he found a section hidden away behind a thick curtain. It was like a secret room that no one had touched in years. Jack searched through the shelves, pulling out dusty volumes, until he came across a worn leather book with a symbol on the cover that matched one from the papers. His heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the key to unlocking the next part of the mystery. He opened the book carefully, its pages fragile with age. Inside, he found more about the artifact, a detailed history, and a warning. The artifact was cursed, and whoever saw it would face dire consequences. But Jack wasn't deterred. He had come this far, and something deep inside told him that this was his path. He had to continue. As he closed the book, he felt a sense of resolve settle over him. It was no longer just about the treasure. It was about uncovering the truth, and perhaps, in some strange way, about redeeming himself for all the years he had spent lost in his own darkness. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, and Jack could feel the adventure calling him forward. He had no idea where this would end, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. The clues were pointing him towards something life-changing, something that would bring him face to face with the past he had tried to forget, and the future he had never dared to imagine. Jack's journey took him deeper into the town's forgotten history with each passing day. As he followed the clues from the old leather book, the pieces of the puzzle began to align, and he could sense that something important was just around the corner. He had already uncovered the location of the artifact, but finding it would not be as simple as following a treasure map. The warning in the book echoed in his mind, but the deeper Jack ventured into the mystery, the more he realized that this was a path he had to take. He couldn't turn back now. His next stop was the town's old cemetery, a place that had always felt eerie to him. The gravestones, many of them cracked and worn, told the stories of the town's earliest inhabitants. Jack knew he had to go there to find the next clue, but something in the air felt different today, heavier. It wasn't just the looming storm clouds gathering above, but a sense of foreboding that Jack couldn't shake. The map led him to a specific gravestone, one that was barely visible under the creeping vines. He cleared away the overgrown plants, revealing the name, Samuel Halloway, etched into the stone. Jack's heart skipped a beat. This was Mabel's husband, the man who had left behind the letter and the legacy. He knelt down beside the gravestone, examining it closely. Just as he was about to stand up, he noticed something strange. The earth around the grave shifted, revealing a small metal box buried beneath the soil. Jack's fingers trembled as he dug it out, the cold metal scraping against the hard ground. Inside the box was another piece of parchment, this time covered in intricate symbols and diagrams. Jack could feel the weight of this discovery in his hands. As he unfolded the paper, he realized it wasn't just another clue. It was the key to unlocking the final part of the mystery. The letter from Samuel Halloway explained that the artifact was hidden beneath the town's old mill, a place that had been abandoned for years. Jack's mind raced as he read the details. The mill had been a thriving business decades ago, but after a series of mysterious fires, it had been left to rot. The letter spoke of a secret entrance hidden in the mill's foundation, a passage that led to a chamber deep below the earth, where the artifact awaited. Jack knew what he had to do next. He had to find the old mill. The mill was located on the outskirts of town, along a forgotten trail lined with wildflowers. As Jack walked toward the overgrown path, he couldn't help but feel like he was being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he reached the mill's decaying walls. The structure was even more intimidating up close. The wooden beams were blackened with age, and the wind seemed to moan through the broken windows. There was a sense of abandonment here, as if the mill had been forgotten by time itself. Jack pushed open the rotting door and stepped inside, his boots crunching on the debris-covered floor. The smell of mildew and decaying wood filled his nostrils. He felt his heart beat faster as he navigated through the dark, musty interior, following the directions from the letter. It wasn't long before he found it, the secret entrance. Hidden beneath a pile of old grain sacks was a trapdoor, just as the letter had described. Jack hesitated for only a moment before lifting it. The metal hinges creaked as he pulled the door open, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into the darkness below. He didn't know what awaited him down there, but he felt a pull, an undeniable urge to continue. As Jack descended into the depths of the mill, the air grew colder, and the darkness pressed in around him. He could hear the faint sound of dripping water somewhere in the distance, but everything else was silent. His footsteps echoed off the stone walls as he reached the bottom of the stairs. There, in the dim light, he saw it. A stone pedestal, and on top of it, the artifact. The object was a small, intricately carved box, no larger than a shoebox. The moment Jack laid his eyes on it, he felt a strange energy surge through his body, as though the artifact was calling to him. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the cool surface of the box. As soon as he touched it, the room seemed to shift. The walls trembled, and the air around him hummed with energy. Jack pulled his hand back, startled. What had he just discovered? Was this the power that the letter had warned about? He didn't know yet, but he could feel the artifact's weight, both physical and spiritual, pressing down on him. The mystery was far from over, and Jack realized that he had just uncovered the first layer of something much bigger than he had imagined. Jack held the small, intricately carved box in his hands, feeling the weight of it like an anchor to his future. The room around him hummed with an almost tangible energy, and the air grew colder with each passing second. The moment he touched the box, something had changed, something profound that he couldn't quite explain. The artifact seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it were alive, waiting for something, or perhaps someone. He hesitated, unsure whether to take it, but the pull he felt was undeniable. This wasn't just a relic, it was the key to something far greater, and Jack could feel it deep in his bones. He carefully lifted the box from its pedestal, cradling it in his hands. The room seemed to hold its breath as he did so, the vibrations around him becoming more intense. The stone walls around him groaned as though they were awakening after years of silence. His mind raced with questions. What had Mabel known? What had Samuel Halloway hidden beneath this town all those years ago? Jack could feel a connection to the artifact, something ancient, yet strangely familiar. He turned and began to retrace his steps, the weight of the box now heavier than ever. As he ascended the narrow staircase back toward the mill's upper floor, the air seemed to press against him. The further he moved away from the artifact's resting place, the more the energy seemed to recede. It was as though the artifact was tethered to the ground, bound by some unseen force, and the further he walked, the less he could feel its presence. When Jack stepped back out into the open air, the storm had arrived in full force. The rain pelted down, and the wind howled through the trees, but Jack didn't care. He had what he came for, the artifact that had been hidden for generations. But as he made his way back toward the truck, a nagging thought began to settle in the back of his mind. Was it really over? Had he truly uncovered the whole mystery? Jack reached the truck, placing the artifact in the passenger seat, his hands still shaking from the weight of what he had just discovered. He turned the key, and the engine roared to life. But just as he was about to drive away, something caught his eye. A shadow moved in the corner of his vision, fleeting and quick. He looked up and saw a figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching him. The figure was tall, cloaked in a dark hood, and stood perfectly still, as though waiting for something. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had seen the figure before. It was the same person who had watched him from a distance the night he saved Mabel. He didn't recognize the face, but the figure's presence was undeniable. Jack's instincts kicked in, and he felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. Without a second thought, he slammed the truck into gear and drove off, his tires screeching on the wet road. As he sped away, he glanced in the rearview mirror, but the figure was gone. The road behind him was empty. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, his mind racing. Who was that person? What did they want with him? And more importantly, what did they know about the artifact? It was clear now, this wasn't just a treasure hunt. This was something much bigger, something dangerous, and Jack was in the middle of it. He drove for miles, not stopping, until the small town faded in the distance behind him. As the storm continued to rage outside, Jack's thoughts turned back to Mabel. What had she known all along? She had been the one to send him on this journey, and now he couldn't help but wonder if she had been watching. All of this unfolded from the beginning. Jack finally pulled over at a small diner on the outskirts of town. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the diner's neon sign flickered in the storm. He stepped inside, shaking off the rain and pulling the artifact from the truck. The familiar warmth of the diner felt like a brief respite from the chaos, but Jack knew he couldn't stay long. He needed answers, and the answers could only come from one place: Mabel. He took a seat at the counter and ordered a cup of coffee, his mind still racing. As the minutes ticked by, Jack's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind him. "I thought I'd find you here." Jack turned around, startled. Standing in the doorway was Mabel, her old face framed by the hood of her rain-soaked coat. She stepped inside, the door creaking as it closed behind her. "You're the one, aren't you?" she said, her voice calm but knowing. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't believe his eyes. Mabel, the woman he had saved, was standing in front of him, and she knew something important, that he didn't. The mystery had just taken another turn, and Jack was no longer sure who to trust. But one thing was certain: he wasn't alone in this. And whatever came next, Mabel held the answers. Jack stared at Mabel, his mind racing. She was standing in the doorway of the diner, looking exactly as she had the night he saved her. But now, there was something different about her. She wasn't the frail, helpless old woman who had been trapped in a car wreck. No, there was strength in her eyes, a kind of knowing that sent a chill down his spine. She stepped inside, and the door creaked closed behind her. Jack's hand instinctively gripped the artifact resting on the table in front of him. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he could feel the weight of it, of everything, growing heavier with each passing second. Mabel, seemingly unaware of the tension, slid into the seat across from him, her wet coat making a soft rustling sound as it settled on the seat. She looked at him calmly, her eyes as sharp as ever. "You've come far, haven't you?" she said softly, her voice carrying a sense of finality. Jack's breath caught in his throat. "What do you know about all of this? About the artifact? About the letter?" Mabel smiled, but there was something eerie about it. "I knew you would find it. I knew you were the one meant to uncover the truth," she replied, her gaze unwavering. Jack was getting frustrated. He had saved her life, followed every clue, and now she was sitting here acting as if everything was a game. He leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Stop playing games, Mabel. I need answers. Who are you really? And why did you send me on this path?" For a moment, Mabel was silent. She studied him with a look that seemed to pierce straight through him, as though she could see every doubt, every fear he had hidden deep inside. Then, finally, she spoke. "I'm not who you think I am, Jack. I never was." Her voice was soft but steady, the words hanging in the air between them like a heavy fog. "I knew the artifact would eventually be found. It's the only way to keep the balance." Jack was confused. He didn't understand what she was talking about. What balance? What was so important about this artifact? Balance? "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "This artifact isn't just some relic, Jack. It's a key to something much bigger than you or me. It has the power to change the world, but only if it's used by the right person." Jack's heart began to race. "What do you mean by the right person? What does it do? Why is it so important?" Mabel leaned back in her chair, folding her hands in front of her. "It's not just about the artifact itself. It's about what it represents. It holds the power to reshape the world as we know it. But in the wrong hands, it can cause chaos. And that's why I've been watching you, Jack. I've been watching to see if you are truly the one who can control it." Jack felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. "So you've been following me? All this time?" Mabel nodded slowly. "Yes, Jack. I've been watching for years, waiting for the right moment. You were never meant to be just another person caught in this town. You were meant to carry the weight of what's hidden here." Jack's mind was spinning. He had thought he was just helping an old woman. But now he realized he had been part of something much larger, something he wasn't prepared for. He glanced down at the artifact, the small box resting in front of him like a puzzle he couldn't solve. It was more than just a box. It was the key to something unimaginable. He looked back at Mabel, his voice barely a whisper. "What do I do now? How do I control it?" Mabel smiled again, but this time it wasn't eerie. It was knowing, almost comforting. "That's the part you have to figure out, Jack. The artifact has chosen you, but it's up to you to decide what to do with it. You'll have to make a choice, and that choice will define the future of this world." Jack felt a wave of dread wash over him. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The path ahead of him was filled with uncertainty, but the answers were within his grasp. And with the artifact in his hands, The fate of the world was now in his hands as well. Jack sat in stunned silence, his hands still gripping the artifact as Mabel's words echoed in his mind. He had been thrust into something far bigger than he could have imagined. The weight of the decision that lay ahead seemed unbearable. The artifact was more than just a piece of history. It was the key to controlling a power that could reshape the world. But with great power came great danger, and Jack wasn't sure if he was the one meant to wield it. He looked up at Mabel, his voice trembling. "I don't know if I can do this. I'm just a man trying to survive. I never asked for any of this." Mabel leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "No one ever does, Jack. The right people don't seek out power. Power finds them, and it will either make them or break them." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "You don't have a choice anymore. The artifact has chosen you. And now, it's up to you to decide what happens next." Jack ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He had always been a man of action, but this was different. This wasn't a battle he could fight with his fists or his instincts. This was a battle for the soul of the world. His mind flashed back to the night he saved Mabel. He had thought it was just a random act of kindness, but now he realized it had been part of a much larger plan. He had been set on this path from the very beginning. But why him? What made him different from everyone else? Mabel must have sensed his confusion because she spoke again, her voice softer now. "The power the artifact holds is tied to the past, Jack. It was created long ago, before even the town was founded. There were those who sought it, and there were those who would do anything to control it. It's been hidden for centuries, but now it's come to you." Jack shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. "Why me? I'm just a veteran who's lost everything. I don't have what it takes to save the world." Mabel reached across the table, placing her hand gently on his. "That's exactly why it's you, Jack. You've lived through loss. You've seen what the world can do to people. You understand what it means to fight for something worth protecting. The artifact didn't choose you because you're perfect. It chose you because you've survived when others would have given up. You're the one who can wield its power without succumbing to its temptations." Jack stared at her, still unsure. The pressure of it all felt like a weight on his chest, one he wasn't sure he could bear. He looked down at the artifact again, wondering if he was truly ready for the responsibility it came with. But before he could speak, Mabel stood up and walked over to the window. The storm outside had calmed, and the sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow across the town. "You have a decision to make, Jack. But remember, every choice you make will have consequences. If you choose to use the artifact's power, you will change the world. But if you choose to let it go, you will be letting go of your chance to alter the course of history." Jack stood up, his legs feeling weak. He walked to the window beside her and looked out at the town he had called home for so long. It seemed so ordinary, so unchanged by the mysteries that lay hidden beneath its surface. But now, everything felt different. He felt different. The town wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was the battleground for something far greater. Jack turned to Mabel, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "What happens if I choose not to use it? If I walk away?" Mabel looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. "If you walk away, the power will remain hidden, and those who seek it will continue to search for it, until they find it in the hands of someone else. Someone who may not be able to control it, someone who may not understand its true power. But if you take it, Jack, you will be the one to control it. You will be the one to decide its fate." Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He had never felt so torn in his life. He had always been someone who fought for what he believed in. But this was different. This wasn't a battle he could win with force. This was about making the right choice for the world, for the future. Jack looked back at the artifact, his mind swirling with doubts. The world was full of dangers, and the power he now held in his hands could either save it or destroy it. There was no turning back. He knew that whatever decision he made would change everything. And with that realization, Jack knew he couldn't keep running from the truth. It was time to face it. It was time to decide what kind of man he was going to be. He turned to Mabel, his voice firm. "I'll take it. I'll make the choice. I have to." Mabel's eyes softened, a look of pride crossing her face. "I knew you would. The path ahead won't be easy, but you're ready. And no matter what happens, you won't be alone." With a deep breath, Jack took the artifact and held it firmly in his hands. The decision had been made. The power was his now, and the world would change because of it. Jack stood with the artifact in his hands, the weight of his decision sinking deeper with every passing second. He had chosen to take control of its power, but now came the hardest part: understanding it, learning how to wield it, and facing the inevitable consequences of his choice. The world outside the diner was quiet now, the storm having passed, leaving behind a damp, heavy stillness. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the fading light seemed to cast a somber glow on everything. Mabel had left him to contemplate in silence, her words still ringing in his mind. She had told him that he would not be alone, but even as the words echoed, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. He had taken the artifact, yes, but he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't know how to control it, or what would happen when he finally did. Jack couldn't ignore the nagging sense that he was being watched again. It was subtle at first, just a shift in the air, a fleeting feeling that someone was following him. He glanced over his shoulder, but the streets remained empty. He pushed the feeling aside and focused on the task at hand. He had to return to the place where it all began, the mill. The map had led him here, but now it was up to him to unlock the next part of the mystery. He needed to understand the artifact's power before it was too late. He drove back to the mill, the quiet hum of the engine filling the otherwise silent night. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. As he arrived, the place seemed even more foreboding than before, the abandoned structure looming in the distance like a specter from the past. The darkness was thicker now, the shadows stretching long and menacing. He parked near the entrance and got out, the cool air brushing against his skin. Jack approached the mill cautiously, the faint sound of his boots crunching on the gravel, the only noise breaking the stillness. The trapdoor, still ajar from the last time he was here, seemed to beckon him. This time, however, Jack wasn't just following clues. He was following a destiny. The air felt charged as he descended the stairs again, the familiar hum of the artifact growing louder with each step. His heart raced as he reached the stone pedestal, the artifact now an undeniable presence in his hands. He placed it back in its rightful place, and for a moment, nothing happened. The room was silent, as if holding its breath. Jack stood there, waiting for something to change. And then, with a sudden jolt, the ground beneath him trembled. A low rumble filled the air, and the walls of the room seemed to shift, as though they were alive. The stone around him groaned, and a hidden door slid open in the far wall, revealing a passage that had been concealed for centuries. Jack's breath caught in his throat. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The path ahead was clear, but it was also unknown. He had no idea where this new passage would lead, but he knew one thing. The artifact had chosen him for a reason. Jack stepped forward, the weight of his decision heavier than ever before. The passage was narrow and winding, the walls closing in around him as he moved deeper into the unknown. The air grew colder, the hum of the artifact growing louder, as if urging him forward. After what felt like an eternity, he reached the end of the passage and found himself standing before another door. This one was different, ancient, ornate, and covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Jack's fingers trembled as he reached for the handle. He didn't know what lay behind this door, but he had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, he opened the door. The room beyond was vast, its ceiling stretching high above him, disappearing into darkness. In the center of the room, a pedestal stood, bathed in a soft, eerie light. On the pedestal was an object, larger than the artifact Jack had been holding, and yet it felt as though it had been waiting for him. Jack approached cautiously, his eyes fixed on the object. As he drew closer, he could see that it was a large crystal, glowing with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. This was it, the true power that the artifact had been leading him to. But as Jack reached out to touch it, a voice echoed in his mind. It was deep, ancient, and filled with both wisdom and warning. You have come far, Jack, but do you truly understand what you seek? The power you hold is both a blessing and a curse. The path ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Jack froze, his hand hovering just above the crystal. The voice continued, as if reading his thoughts. This power can save or destroy. It is not your destiny alone to decide, but the world's. And the world will change because of your choice. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment. The weight of everything he had learned, everything he had done, was coming to a head. He had the power to change everything. But was he ready to carry the burden? Jack stood frozen, his hand hovering over the crystal that sat upon the pedestal. The voice in his mind was still echoing, its warning reverberating in the silence that filled the vast room. The power he was about to touch was not just a force, it was a test, a trial that would define not only his fate but the fate of the world itself. As he stared at the crystal, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him harder than ever. The room felt alive, the air thick with the ancient energy that hummed from the artifact. Jack's heart raced as he fought the urge to step back. The voice had been clear. The power could save or destroy, and the world would change based on the choice he made. But could he handle it? Could he control it? He had already walked this far down the path, and there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Jack reached out, his fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through his body. His vision blurred, and the world around him seemed to dissolve, replaced by flashes of memories and images that were not his own. He saw glimpses of the past, ancient civilizations, long-forgotten wars, and people whose names had been erased by time. He saw the creation of the artifact, its purpose to maintain balance in a world that had lost its way. And he saw the darkness, the men and women who had sought to use the artifact for their own gain, to reshape the world in their image. The power was not just a tool, it was a force that could bend reality itself. And now, Jack understood its true nature. The crystal was a source of untold power, but it was also a mirror. It reflected the heart of its wielder, amplifying their strengths and weaknesses alike. It could bring out the best in a person, but it could also expose their darkest desires. Jack pulled his hand away from the crystal, gasping for breath as the images faded. He stumbled backward, his mind reeling from the overwhelming flood of visions. The weight of the decision was more real than ever. He knew now that the artifact was not just about power, it was about choice. The choice to wield it with wisdom, or the choice to let it consume him. The voice in his mind spoke again, this time softer, almost comforting. You have seen what lies ahead, Jack. You have seen the consequences of your choices. But remember, the future is not set. It can be shaped by the decisions you make in the present. Jack stood there, his mind struggling to process what he had just experienced. The weight of the crystal in his hands was heavier now, but it wasn't just the physical weight. It was the emotional and moral weight of the choice he had to make. He wasn't just holding an artifact. He was holding the fate of the world. The air around him shifted as the door to the chamber creaked open. Jack turned to see Mabel standing there, her silhouette framed by the doorway. She stepped into the room slowly, her eyes fixed on the crystal in his hands. You felt it, haven't you? She asked softly. Jack nodded, still struggling to find his voice. It's not just about the power, is it? Mabel smiled faintly, her eyes filled with understanding. No, Jack. It's about how you choose to use it. It's about the responsibility you take on when you decide to wield the power of the artifact. You have the ability to change the world, but it's up to you to decide what kind of world you want to create. Jack looked down at the crystal again, the weight of its power pressing on him. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he admitted, his voice rough. Mabel placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly strong for her age. No one ever is, Jack. But you've been chosen because you've already faced the darkness. You've seen the worst of humanity, and you've survived. Now, you have the chance to shape the future, to make a choice that will define everything. Jack took a deep breath and stepped closer to the pedestal. He could feel the energy in the room, still pulsing, waiting for him to make his move. The decision was his, and his alone. There was no guide, no map to follow. He had to trust himself. And as he stood there, staring at the crystal, he realized something. The artifact didn't just represent power, it represented hope. Hope for a future that could be better, hope for a world that could be healed. It was a chance to undo the wrongs of the past and build something new. But that hope came with a price. To wield this power meant accepting the responsibility of changing the world. Jack had no illusions about what was at stake. He knew that the future wasn't guaranteed, that his choices would shape the world in ways he couldn't predict. But in that moment, he knew what he had to do. With a steady hand, he reached out and took hold of the crystal once more. The power surged through him again, but this time, he didn't resist. He embraced it, knowing that whatever came next, He would face it with the strength he had earned. The world would change, but Jack was ready to guide it, to make the choices that would lead to a future he believed in. Jack stood before the crystal, feeling its power surge through him. The artifact, now fully in his grasp, seemed to hum with an energy all its own. It was as if the room, the town, and even the very air around him were vibrating in response to the power he had chosen to wield. The weight of the decision still pressed down on him, but he felt a deep sense of purpose. This was the moment that would define everything. As he looked around the room, he noticed something had changed. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, and the atmosphere in the chamber had grown thicker, heavier. It was as if the very fabric of reality had shifted. He wasn't alone anymore. He could feel eyes on him. The energy from the crystal felt both exhilarating and terrifying, a constant reminder that he was in control of something far greater than himself. But there was no turning back. Jack took a deep breath and focused on the task at hand. He knew the power of the artifact had the potential to shape the future, to change the world in ways that were beyond his comprehension. But it was also clear that with such power came immense responsibility. The world wasn't ready for this. He wasn't ready for this. But the world wasn't going to wait for him to be ready. As Jack stood there, the artifact glowing brightly in his hands, he realized something profound. It wasn't just about wielding power. It was about choice, his choice. The future would be what he made of it. The voice in his mind that had warned him earlier spoke again, this time more urgent. The time has come, Jack. You must make your choice. You cannot control this power alone. You must share it. You must decide who will stand with you, who will share in the responsibility of guiding the future. Jack's mind raced as he pondered the voice's words. He couldn't do this alone. He had known that for a long time. The world, the people in it, needed guidance, but they also needed someone to help them harness the power of the artifact. The choices ahead of him weren't just about him. They were about everyone. Jack knew he needed to find allies, people who would help him navigate the dangerous road ahead. He couldn't be the only one who carried this burden. The artifact, while powerful, was not something that could be controlled by a single person. It was too great, too dangerous. With that realization, Jack knew what he had to do. He couldn't keep the artifact to himself, not if he wanted to protect the world from its potential misuse. He had to find the right people, those who could be trusted to help him shape the future. But who could he trust? Mabel had been the one to guide him this far, but there was something deeper at play here. She knew more about the artifact than she had let on. Was she truly on his side, or was she hiding something from him? Jack's thoughts were interrupted as the ground beneath him trembled slightly. He looked around the room and saw the walls shifting again, as if the very structure of the place was reacting to the artifact. It was clear that time was running out. The world was waiting for him to make a move. The air around him grew colder, and Jack could feel the pressure mounting. He knew that whatever decision he made next would change everything. He couldn't delay any longer. As he looked down at the crystal in his hands, he felt a surge of clarity. This wasn't just about saving the world. It was about saving himself, too. He had spent years running from his past, from the guilt and the pain. But the artifact had forced him to confront his fears, to face his own demons. He wasn't just saving the world. He was saving himself. With a final breath, Jack made his decision. He would not face this alone. He would find the people who could help him. But first, he needed to confront Mabel. He needed answers from her, answers that she had been withholding. He knew that the power of the artifact was too great for one person to handle, but he also knew that it could be the key to changing everything. He turned and made his way out of the chamber, the weight of the artifact still heavy in his hands. As he stepped into the hallway, he was met by the same shadowy figure he had seen before, standing in the doorway. Jack's heart skipped a beat. It was the same person who had been following him, watching him from the shadows. But now, they were closer than ever. Jack's instincts kicked in, and he took a step back, his hand instinctively moving toward the artifact. The figure stepped forward, their face still obscured by the shadows. "You are ready, Jack," the voice whispered. "You've made your choice, but now the real test begins." Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea who this person was, or what their intentions were, but he knew one thing for sure. The time for hesitation was over. The future was here, and it was waiting for him to decide what came next. Jack's pulse quickened as the shadowy figure took a step closer, their presence somehow both threatening and intriguing. The figure's features were still obscured, their face hidden beneath a dark hood. Jack gripped the artifact tighter, feeling its power surge through him. He didn't know who this person was, but he sensed that they held the answers he desperately needed. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice steady despite the tension that was building in the room. The figure's lips curled into a faint smile, though their eyes remained hidden. "You already know the answer, Jack," the figure replied, their voice low and measured, like a whisper that seemed to fill the entire chamber. "You felt the pull of the artifact, just as I have. And now, you've come to understand its true purpose." Jack's mind raced. What did this person mean by that? Had they been watching him all along, just like Mabel? "What do you want from me?" Jack demanded, trying to steady his breath. The figure took another step forward, their movements fluid and deliberate. "I want nothing from you, Jack," they said. "I'm here to help you, to guide you, if you're willing to listen." Jack felt a flash of anger. "I don't need your help. I've made my decision. I'll use the artifact to shape the future." The figure's gaze seemed to pierce right through him, their presence unnerving. "You don't understand," they said, their voice growing more urgent. "The power of the artifact is not something you can control alone. It is a force that will test you, will push you to your limits. You are not ready for the consequences of your choice." Jack felt a knot tighten in his chest. "What consequences?" "I've already made my decision," he said, trying to ignore the doubt that was creeping into his thoughts. The figure stepped closer still, their voice now almost a whisper. "You think you've chosen the right path, but you've only seen one side of the coin. There is always another side, Jack. The artifact is not simply a tool to reshape the world. It is a mirror. It will reflect your innermost desires, your deepest fears. And once you've tapped into its power, you cannot undo what you've started." Jack's stomach churned. He could feel the weight of the figure's words sinking in. Was he truly ready to face whatever the artifact had in store for him? Had he truly understood the full extent of its power? "You're lying," Jack snapped, his voice growing stronger. "I've seen what it can do. I know what I'm capable of." The figure didn't respond immediately, but Jack could feel their gaze lingering on him, their presence like a heavy weight in the air. "You think you're capable of controlling it," the figure said finally, "but no one truly can. The artifact has a will of its own. It chooses its wielder, but it also chooses when and how to use that person. You can fight it, but in the end, the artifact will make the decisions. It will shape you, not the other way around." Jack's heart thudded in his chest as the figure's words sank in. The doubt that had been lingering in the back of his mind was now at the forefront of his thoughts. He had been so certain, so sure of his ability to control the power. But now, the uncertainty was growing. He wasn't just dealing with an object. He was dealing with a force that could reshape everything. "What do you want from me?" Jack asked again, his voice quieter this time. "I want you to understand the truth," the figure replied. "The artifact will either break you or make you stronger, depending on the choices you make. But it will not let you go without a price. And that price, Jack, is more than you can imagine." Jack's grip on the artifact tightened. He had come this far, had made his choice, but now the weight of what he was about to do felt so much heavier. The future was uncertain, and he wasn't sure if he could bear the consequences. "I'll face whatever comes," Jack said finally, his voice steady, though his heart was still racing. "I've already made my choice. I'll use the artifact to change the world. I'll accept whatever price comes with it." The figures seemed to study him for a moment, their gaze unreadable. Then, with a slow nod, they stepped back into the shadows, their presence fading from the room. "So be it," the figures said, their voice fading with them. "But remember, Jack, the world will change, and you will change with it." With that, the room seemed to shift, the oppressive atmosphere lifting just slightly. Jack was left standing alone in the chamber, the artifact still glowing in his hands, its power now undeniable. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the choice he had made. There was no going back now. The future was waiting for him to decide, and the world would never be the same again. Jack stood alone in the chamber, the air thick with the weight of his decision. The shadowy figure had disappeared, leaving behind only their words and the lingering sense of uncertainty that clung to him like a second skin. He could still feel the power of the artifact pulsing in his hands, its glow steady and unwavering. But the glow was no longer reassuring. It felt like a challenge, like a test that he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Jack took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The figure's warning echoed in his mind. The artifact will either break you or make you stronger, depending on the choices you make. But what choices did he have left? He had already chosen to take the artifact, to change the course of the future. But now, standing here, he wasn't so sure that was the right path. He wasn't sure he understood what he had really gotten himself into. The weight of the world seemed to hang over him, and he could feel the eyes of the universe upon him, waiting for him to make the next move. There was no turning back now. The figure was right. Jack couldn't do this alone. He had to make the hard decision. Would he use the artifact's power for the greater good, or would it corrupt him, turning him into the very thing he had fought against? The chamber around him seemed to hum with energy, the walls seemingly alive, as if the room itself was waiting for Jack's decision. He looked down at the artifact once more. It had come to him for a reason. It had chosen him, and now it was up to him to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. The weight in his chest grew heavier, but it was a weight he was beginning to accept. He had fought his entire life for something, always seeking redemption for the mistakes of his past, and now, he was facing the biggest decision of his life. He could feel the pull of the artifact, its energy reaching out to him, urging him to use it, to bend the world to his will. But was that what he wanted? The power to reshape the world, to change the course of history, was intoxicating. But Jack knew, deep down, that it came with consequences. The world was fragile. He was fragile. One wrong move, and it could all fall apart. But could he afford to sit back and do nothing? Could he let the world continue on its current path, knowing that he had the ability to change it? The silence in the room was deafening. Jack stood still, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, he closed his eyes and took another deep breath, centering himself. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to let fear dictate his choices. The world needed change, and he was the one who had been chosen to bring it. But he would not do it alone. Jack opened his eyes and turned toward the doorway. He needed allies, people who could help him understand the true nature of the artifact and help him wield its power wisely. He couldn't carry this burden on his own, but he knew where to find them. Mabel. She had always been there, guiding him when he needed it most. She had known more than she had let on, and now, it was time for her to reveal the truth. Jack turned and walked toward the exit of the chamber, the artifact still glowing brightly in his hands. As he stepped into the hallway, he felt a strange sense of clarity wash over him. The decision had been made. He would seek out Mabel and those who could help him. The world was waiting for him to act, and he couldn't afford to wait any longer. As Jack made his way back to the surface, the feeling of being watched returned. He wasn't sure if it was the lingering presence of the shadowy figure or something else entirely, but it was unsettling. He quickened his pace, his instincts on high alert. The world outside was no less ominous than the one he had just left behind. The storm had passed, but the air still felt heavy, like a storm was waiting to break. Jack made his way to the diner where he had last seen Mabel, hoping she was still there. He needed to find her, to confront her, and to finally get the answers he so desperately sought. When he arrived, the diner was empty, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the low murmur of a radio playing in the background. He spotted her in the far corner, sitting at a booth, her hands folded in front of her. She looked up as Jack approached, her expression unreadable. "You've made your choice, haven't you?" she said quietly. Jack nodded, sitting down across from her. "I'm ready to face whatever comes next," he said, his voice steady. Mabel studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Good. The world is about to change, Jack. But remember, power is never given freely. It always comes with a price." Jack didn't respond. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to use the artifact to shape the future. But he also knew that the real test was just beginning. The world would change, but so would he. And there was no telling what the price would be. The weight of the decision Jack had made still pressed on him as he sat across from Mabel. The world outside seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the moment when everything would change. The artifact in his hands was a constant reminder that the path ahead would be anything but easy. Yet, as Mabel's words echoed in his mind, Jack knew that there was no turning back. The power he had chosen to embrace was now his responsibility. He had already seen the danger that came with it, the way it could either heal or destroy, depending on the choices made. And now, he was at the crossroads, facing the consequences of his decision. "The world is about to change, Jack," Mabel had said, her voice steady but filled with a deep understanding. "But remember, power is never given freely. It always comes with a price." Jack stood up from the booth, his thoughts churning. The truth of those words weighed heavily on him. He wasn't just holding an artifact. He was holding the future. The future of not just his own life, but of everyone around him. The air in the diner felt thick with anticipation, as though the world itself was watching him, waiting for him to act. He couldn't let fear guide him any longer. With the artifact in his hands, he had the power to shape the future. But it wasn't just about the power. It was about the people who would be affected by it. The future wasn't something to be taken lightly. Jack knew he couldn't make this choice alone. He needed allies, people he could trust, people who would help him bear the weight of the responsibility. Mabel had shown him that the power of the artifact could corrupt, could destroy, but it could also heal, could rebuild. But Jack wasn't sure if he could trust everyone with it. He thought of the shadowy figure, the one who had warned him, the one who had hinted that there were forces at work behind the scenes, forces Jack had yet to understand. The figure had said that he wasn't alone in this, that there were others who knew what the artifact was capable of, and that worried him. The road ahead would be full of dangers, and Jack knew that if he made the wrong move, it could be catastrophic. He needed to prepare himself for the challenges ahead. He needed to find those who would stand with him, those who would help him use the artifact wisely, so it didn't consume him. Jack looked down at the artifact once again, feeling its power surging within him. He had made his choice, and there was no going back. The future was now in his hands, but it wasn't just his future to shape. It was the future of everyone. As he left the diner, the world outside seemed to have changed. The streets were quieter, the air still, as if holding its breath for what was to come. Jack walked with purpose, his mind set on the path ahead. He had no illusions about the dangers that lay in wait. But he was determined. He wasn't going to let the artifact's power control him. He would control it, shape it into something that could heal, something that could rebuild what had been broken. But first, he needed to confront the forces that were out there, the ones who would stop at nothing to claim the power for themselves. Jack knew that he couldn't do this alone. But with the artifact in his hands, he wasn't entirely alone. The people he had met along the way, Mabel, the shadowy figure, and the others who would come, would help him navigate this new world. Together, they would face the darkness and the uncertainty, and together, they would shape the future. He could feel the energy of the artifact coursing through him, pushing him forward. The road ahead was unknown, but Jack was ready. He had made his choice, and now it was time to see it through. He could feel the world shifting around him, as if the very fabric of reality was being rewoven. The future was waiting, and Jack knew that whatever happened next, he would face it head-on. The world would change, and he would be a part of that change. With the artifact in his hands, he was no longer just a man. He was the one who would shape the course of history. I have written an intense and captivating story of a man who finds himself thrust into an extraordinary destiny. This is a story of courage, choice, and redemption, where a veteran's journey reveals the profound impact of power and the responsibility that comes with it. The narrative follows the struggles of a man who must decide how to wield an ancient artifact capable of changing the world. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the path ahead is filled with uncertainty and challenges, but it is also a journey of personal growth and realization. Through the veteran's eyes, we witness a deeper understanding of what it means to carry the weight of the past, while stepping into a future shaped by one's choices. In the world of veteran stories, this narrative stands as a reminder of the inner strength required to face insurmountable odds. As Jack learns to navigate the complexities of power, the reader is drawn into a world where decisions echo through time. With each new revelation, the stakes grow higher, leading to a climax that promises to change everything. The story dives into the heart of veteran stories, showing how past struggles shape present actions and how one man's decision can alter the course of history. As Jack faces the ultimate challenge, he realizes that it's not just about what he holds, but about how he chooses to use it. With the world on his shoulders, he embarks on a journey to secure the future while confronting the forces that threaten it. This is a tale for those who enjoy veteran stories filled with mystery, adventure, and the unrelenting power of choice.